Hello everyone, and welcome to this panel on storytelling and audience data. I'll be chairing the panel. I'm Danae Stanton Fraser. I'm a professor in psychology at the University of Bath, and I lead a research lab in the area of human-computer interaction. And at the University of Bath, I'm the lead on the cluster. Our team are carrying out research evaluating audience experiences of immersive pieces and studies of virtual reality. For accessibility, we'll all give a visual description of ourselves. So I'm a white female with blonde hair, a little bit longer than it normally is because it hasn't been cut for a while. I'm wearing a blue top and my background is yellow. I would also like to introduce our British Sign Language interpreter, David, who you'll see on screen. David is a middle-aged man wearing an open collar shirt, and he's set in front of a blue background. Thank you, David. And Sarah, who's just appeared on screen. Sarah is also a BSL interpreter. Thank you, Sarah. She's a white woman in her early 40s. She's wearing a black top. Her hair is short and red, and she's sitting in front of a sort of grey-green screen. Right, I'm also going to, I've got a fantastic panel today. So I'm working closely with Kate Cross at the Egg Theatre and Ellie, hi Kate, and Elly Chadwick, who unfortunately can't be here today, but we're hoping we might get one of her pieces. I can tell you a bit about that later for you to see. And Anna Levordashka, who works with me at the University of Bath. We all collaborate closely, and so I'm really looking forward to this panel and to talking to them. I'm going to start by asking them to briefly introduce themselves, and then I'll tell you a little bit of about the panel. So, Kate, can I ask you to introduce yourself first, please?
Yes, hello. Yeah, I'm Kate Cross. My pronouns are she, her, and I work at the Theatre Royal Bath. I'm the director of the Egg Theatre, and the Egg Theatre is a theatre dedicated to making and presenting work with and for children and young people. So I spend most of my time producing work, live performance for young audiences. I'm 57 years old, I'm white, I have grayer than normal brown hair, which is now longer than normal at about shoulder length. I wear glasses and I'm sitting in a bright, sunlight-filled day room with a keyboard and a sofa behind me. Do you want me to do my research focus now, or do we move on?
Yes, that would be great. Yes,
okay, so my area of research during this period has been the creation of a digital classroom-based, teacher-led, live show-related learning portal. And this one is based on our new production of Josephine, which is a play about the life and lives of Josephine Baker. But presumably our next learning portal will be about the next play we make. The portal will prepare in advance a young audience to have a meaningful and mindful experience of watching a play. And then a guiding hand in enabling them to unpack and reflect upon that play and its themes after the event. Other areas of research at the Egg very quickly include the deployment of bot technology for supporting our artistic facilitation with young people, to digitally badge or not to digitally badge online learning, a massive organization-wide examination of our ethical practice, and I would be lying if I didn't also say that a big area of research at present is quite simply survival.
Thanks, Kate. That's great. Apologies for my door going. It always happens, doesn't it, when you're working at home? Can I move over to Anna to introduce herself as well, please?
Thank you, Danae, and thanks for everyone who's joined us on the panel. It's really great to be in the same space, even if it's only virtual. I'm Anna. I'm a white woman in my early 30s. I am Bulgarian, and so is my accent. I am a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Bath. I'm a psychologist, and I'm very interested in psychological methods and measurement, like really interested. To me, that's really question of how do we measure minds? How do we capture something so ephemeral and subjective like psychological experiences? A lot of my work revolves around the usability of methods, so making sure that the research we do is meaningful and engaging for participants and also understood. I work as a cross-cutting fellow on the creative cluster, and my work there involves doing in-depth mixed method research with audiences, which you'll hear more about in a moment. Yeah,
thanks, Anna. That's great. And I'm really interested because Anna has joined us in the Create Lab. She's been with us for over a year, and we've only actually met once in person, which was when she first came. But I feel like I know Anna really well because we speak every, few days online. So it's an interesting experience, and we're going to be talking through some of the work that we've been doing, both at the university and with the egg as well. So what I'm going to do is just tell you the plan. We've only got 45 minutes, which will go incredibly quickly. So the plan today is to discuss storytelling and the evaluation of audience engagement, which obviously has changed to some extent over the last year or so. And I think we want to provide a little bit of insight into some of the work that's going on in the cluster. Both Anna and Kate have kindly said that they'll give us a sort of 5 to 7 minutes brief of what their current work is about and their thinking. And I'm going to then chair a discussion around some of the emerging themes. Now someone's phone is going, sorry, and some of the emerging themes. And please do put, for the audience, please do put any questions in the chat for discussion, and I'll try to get to as many of them in the time available. So I'm going to pass over so that we can hear about the work that's going on. And then I really look forward to sort of pulling out some of the themes. And as I said, do put questions in the chat. I'll try and get to as many as I can. We've only got a short time, so I look forward to seeing those questions as well. And we're going to start with Kate. So over to you, Kate. And I shall switch my thing onto mute because my house seems very busy today. Thanks, Kate.
Thanks, Danae. So I do have to now revert on my screen to something that's kind of more or less pre-written. So it makes me feel very disconnected from talking to people, but I'm going to do my best to stay human in this process. So bear with me. So I was sort of asked to talk about my understanding of the word dramaturgy. Dramaturgy, which isn't a word that's necessarily in everybody's everyday vernacular. But it is something that we all do all the time. So it's, think of it as our narrative arc, or how we spin a good yarn, and how we assemble a lexicon of signs and symbols and signals and get them in the right order so that you can ignite imagination, entice curiosity, encourage non-prescriptive understanding. So what I mean by that is my audience getting it. I don't mean getting it up here, because that's not in my gift. I mean getting it in here, this kind of physical, sort of visceral response. So good dramaturgy opens the door to insights, connections, and ultimately self-directed learning. So it's not just plays that require good dramaturgy. Letters, text messages, jokes, lyrics, photograph albums, after-dinner speeches, funding applications even, and also, of course, lessons and lectures. And in my world of making theatre for young audiences, dramaturgy is a key thing. And I think that's because a lot of the work that we make for young audiences is original. It may be a commissioned playwright, or it may be devised work in a room. And so obviously the order, everything about the structure of that piece is absolutely key. And a lot of people who make work or perform work for young audiences sometimes trot out the line that young audiences are your most honest audience. I don't actually completely agree with that, because if you asked the child after they'd been to see a play what they thought of it, the chances are they'll go, it was great, it was cool. And that's because they're mainly polite to adults. And they don't want to hurt your feelings because you paid money to go and see the play. Or also, maybe they just don't want to get involved in a kind of over-intellectual conversation, and they've got their eye on that cake they were promised after the show. But if you watch their body during a live performance, it tells another story. The story, that's the honest story that the child audience is telling you about the dramaturgical structure of a play. And if you're lucky enough to then be able to listen to their burbling and their conversations and their play, hours or days or even weeks after they've seen that play, then you can start to build up a true picture. And so in this sense, I often see children, even as young as babies, as being kind of born dramaturgs. I don't understand how, because I'm not the neuroscientist here, but they just sort of are. So when I'm involved in producing or dramaturging a play, I tend to think of that arc not as the structure of a play, because that's a bit too sort of scientific and prescriptive to me, but I think about the dramaturgical arc of the audience experience. How can we pace that emotional, visceral, physical, and intellectual response to what they're seeing so that it creates something that is engaging and igniting? And that, for me, I suppose, is based on nothing more scientific than what I've observed in those wriggly bodies over the years of working at the Egg. So how then do I apply this in a digital context, in this case, in the learning portal that I'm working on at the moment related to Josephine Baker? So this portal started off its life as a marketing tool. It would be a curriculum-focused product that would add value to a live performance so that we can bribe schools to take our live touring show or to come and see it in the Egg or somewhere else. We chose to use the Stornoway platform so to deliver this digital asset. So our delivery style is video, be that filmed content, archive footage or animation or a combination of all those things. However, the journey the classroom takes through those multiple series of films is of their own making. That's how Stornoway works. It's a where do you want to go next, this way or that, choose your own journey, coded video platform. Enter our world of existential and dramaturgical trauma. Now we find ourselves deep in dramaturgical inquiry regarding, you know, how to maintain a dramatic arc when the audience is choosing its own path, and what even is dramaturgy in film, and how come I've just become a filmmaker. With the learning portal, we're also addressing how to deliver something that is useful for the national curriculum without actually delivering the national curriculum. Why would we do that? We're a theatre. Then again, we don't need another play. We've already got that, Josephine. So what actually is this product? Asks the dramaturg and the producer inside my head. So we're deep in the throes of making it this week. We've been in the rehearsal room. I'm still writing bits of script. So we're really profoundly in the process at the moment. So what it's going to be and the impact it's going to have, we still don't know. But what are we learning? Well, we are learning that we must lean into our skill as theatre makers, adopting those tools of theatrical, dramaturgical structure and inventiveness, fun, joy, humour, pathos, elicit a sense of that wonderful feeling you have when you're in the presence of something that is well conceived and has an overall integrity. How do we include the viewer with authenticity, i.e. we acknowledge that they're there without asking false, fake questions like, you know, can you help us? How to make it feel live, even though we're not live. We're also creating it bilingually between English, BSL and sign-supported English. So we're learning an awful lot about bilingual presentation. How not to make just another, how not to make the play of Josephine that we've been working on for 6 years redundant or to sort of overshadow it. And how do we create this dramatic arc, even though the viewers will all go on a different journey? And ultimately, as an organization, what do we want to learn in the future? Well, artistically, is this a thing? I mean, it sort of feels like it at the moment, but are we inventing or innovating or just reinventing a wheel, you know, badly? Can we apply it to other plays that we produce in the future? Educationally, how far across primary and secondary schools can it find its home? Which obviously leads us to demand. Financially, can we monetize this in the future? Can we make it worth the time and money we've spent on it? And in so doing, reach a wider and more inclusive audience, which ultimately will develop a new, bigger young audience for live theatre. So is this the Egg's future business plan, or have we just thrown ourselves off a cliff and are we flying at speed towards a big fat splat? Thanks.
Hopefully not, Kate, but that was really interesting. Thank you. I've got lots of questions for you, but I'm going to pass over to Anna to talk a little bit more about collecting audience data. I think we've then got Ellie's video to show, and then we'll dive into some discussion, and I look forward to talking to you about some of the methods that you're using. Anna, can I pass over to you to speak for a few minutes about the work that you're doing at the moment, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Danae. And yeah, thanks so much, David, for interpreting. I'm going to now share my screen because I have prepared a couple of slides. Just need to...
If they're not coming up, Anna, would you like us to show, Danae can share them, or we can show the video and then go to you?
I think I'm managing, sorry, it's just a little bit.
No, that's fine.
When I practiced it, can you see it now?
No.
Thank you, Danae. No.
There we go, they're up, Anna. You're away.
You can see it now?
We can, yes.
Oh, okay, great. I'm just going to... Thank you. I don't know why this... I'm just going to leave them like this. I hope that's okay. I'm just looking at my slides and I realized, how dark I made them, which is not really fitting for a sunny day, but it is fitting in my head with the whole situation and the pandemic we are going to talk about today. In terms of my talk, this is also another story of us trying to deliver performances to people's homes and to gather rich data as we do, and what we've done to adapt to the situation. We're an interdisciplinary team of psychologists working with an engineer, and we're all interested in art and technology, and as I said earlier, in user-centered design. Before I go ahead and talk about what went wrong and the pandemic and how we've had to adapt to this, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about kind of our original vision, what we wanted to do and why. So the goal of the project it is to use mixed methods to study audiences. So we want to combine the kind of better known retrospective measures like interviews and questionnaires with more advanced measures of momentary experience, things like motion tracking and heart rate, as well as experience sampling. And the reason we do that, it's not just for the sake of using cool methods. We do it because sometimes hearts and minds, they tell different stories. And I'll just give you some examples. For example, we say that we find film more engaging, but actually our hearts seem to respond more strongly to audiobooks. We can't necessarily tell when we're fully immersed, fully captivated, because that's kind of the nature of immersion, not being fully aware. But we are slower to hear and respond to a tone. Also, when we're immersed, our bodies tend to synchronize, our brains do as well. And that's not something we're necessarily consciously aware of. So there are all these fascinating processes that we can't necessarily access and report in our conscious mind. Now, one key challenge in this kind of work, especially in audience research, is to keep the experience intact. So yeah, as researchers, we would love to have people wrapped up in all kinds of sensors and also talk to them for hours on end. But we also want to preserve the integrity of experiences. We want to still deliver something that is meaningful and complete. So that is the kind of challenge that originally brought our team together. But of course, on top of this came the pandemic, so we've had to do all of this, which was already quite complex. We had to do it remotely. The pandemic itself and the kind of damage it's done to the sector is enormous, and I don't even want to start talking about it. So I'm just going to jump straight ahead to what we've designed. So basically what you're looking at, this is an online platform which we can use to stream performances and gather data. Basically, what you see here on the screen is the view that our participants would have. And some of you may recognize the play, The Bullet and the Bass Trombone. It is produced by Sleep Dogs and Make, who, well, they've really excitedly agreed to collaborate with us on this. So that's kind of what we're first using to show our participants. The measures we use here, first of all, we're recording participants using a webcam, which then my colleague, Paul Hill, analyzes using computer vision algorithms. So we get a really fine-grained analysis of movement. And we also have experience sampling. So our participants hear a kind of gentle tone throughout the performance, and they tell us what they're thinking about. If they're thinking about the performance, something else, or nothing at all. And there are also questionnaires, and I know questionnaires, but we have really done our best to kind of keep them conversational and interesting. So this is what the setup is. It may not look like much, but what I want to say is that these are some really powerful methods. So some of the most impactful psychological research, things that you probably have heard about and are now almost common knowledge, they were discovered using these methods. So we did some pilot research. We did multiple iterations of this to make sure that it is as intuitive and kind of not annoying as possible. And yeah, our next steps are to collect data, to try and discuss this data widely, and just see what we can find out about how people experience the performance. We are also adapting this methodology for VR and in-person research. And yeah, that's kind of it. If you are interested in this kind of work, I just wanted to plug this here. Just keep in touch via the cluster channels. We'll be sharing updates there. We also published some of our thoughts on working with remote audiences. And this is in a paper together with Elly Chadwick, who couldn't join us today, but hopefully you'll get to see her video in a moment. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. I really look forward to your questions, and I'll pass over to Danae if I manage to unshare my screen.
And hopefully Kate will come back on screen. Oh, we can show, we're going to show Ellie's video now. So Elly Chadwick is a theatre director and producer and writer, and also an academic. And she's a fellow on the cluster programme. And it's a shame she can't be with us today, but we have got a video of hers to show now, which I'm hoping will come up on the screen any minute. Oh,
hi
super,
everyone,
thank
and
you.
I'm really sorry that I'm not there in person today, coming to you live, but I'd like to talk a little bit about my research project for the Expanded Performance Fellowship, which is focused on exploring possibilities for integrated data gathering in online immersive theatre experiences. This was a step change from my original plan for the fellowship, which was to look at digitally enhanced but in-person immersive theatre and how it affects audiences differently than traditional, less multisensory or non-immersive theatre. I was originally going to explore various questions around the potential for it to be transformative and how it creates new rituals of behaviour in audiences, and also how we might more creatively and more usefully gather and analyse this type of knowledge and data. I planned to integrate methods from neuroscience and psychology as well as audience studies to combine the collection of neuroscientific data, things such as heart rate and skin conductance responding, with qualitative data using questionnaires and interviews. The case study I was going to use to try these methods out was a theatre show called Ergosum, which I've been developing for a few years and which was going to be performed at Bristol Old Vics Ferment Festival last summer. When this changed due to lockdowns, I started thinking about how my research questions and approaches might fit into an online-based exploration instead. As became clear quite early on, understanding digitally enhanced and delivered experiences, and in particular digital audiences, all of a sudden became much more urgent and relevant. A lot of the questions around audience engagement and behaviour that the theatre industry have been forced to consider more thoroughly recently are ones that already existed, such as anxiety around audience power granted by social media, erasure of divergent voices, exclusion due to various constraints, also new interest in sensorial technologies, the potential for screen technology to be distracting, and issues around liveness and presence. Though these questions were already being explored, the new large-scale reliance on digital theatre modes has led to expanding industry emphasis on digital accessibility and immersion, and a growing drive to understand how explorations of space, liveness and collective presence through digital technologies are engaging audiences. So as both a researcher and a theatre maker, I felt that innovative audience studies methods could provide indispensable learning for industry, exploring potential of digital theatre to improve togetherness, accessibility and engagement longer term. The changing landscape of digital theatre presents new, exciting possibilities and also potential pitfalls around ethics, data and responsibility which need assessing. So all this brings me back to Ergosum. The original theatre production used a combination of live performance with digital technologies to immerse audiences in the worlds of neurodiverse characters, exploring neurology, mental health, and the diversity of human experience. In moving the research in the theatre project online during this fellowship, I first designed a scientific experiment with support from Professor Ute Leonards in psychology. This study looks at very simple and basic measurements of immersion, engagement, and empathy or compassion in different audio environments, examining how audio immersion affects the way that online audiences engage and respond. The experiment is live at the moment, so if you'd like to participate, please do note down my email address on the screen and feel free to drop me a line. While this study is set up in a very scientific way with a simple focus in order to gather clear and basic initial data, I've also been working on something more complex and creative, developing an interactive online version of Ergosum. This online piece is theatrical, still utilising technology like binaural sound and animation to immerse audiences sensorially, but it also has the additional element of interactivity and branching storylines. This structure is allowing me to turn it into an audience data gathering experiment. I've been building the experience using a combination of tools, working mainly in a program called Stornoway to storyboard and map out the experience, with the aim of launching through the BBC R&D MakerBox tool Storyformer, which has the capability to gather audience click data so that I can see patterns of how people engage through the entire experience. By viewing their choices throughout, as well as gathering reactions through various integrated questions and chances to respond, I hope to build a picture of how audiences are impacted by various different narrative and immersion techniques. The reasons why I feel that a more integrated form of data gathering could be so useful for theatre makers like myself in order to better understand their digital audiences include the fact that we are not interrupting immersion or detracting from effects of the experience itself, but instead building feedback in through creative storytelling checkpoints. This means that the audience are also giving feedback throughout instead of just at the end. The experience is a journey and the audience member will likely go through multiple states of emotional arousal or engagement and immersion, not the one-off reflective and slightly distant state that could be measured through a final questionnaire, for example. There are also multiple ways of giving feedback. Some are more conscious and some are subconscious in that their choice patterns may reflect and reveal patterns of response, engagement and empathy. The plan for Ergosum is also for it to be an episodic experience, enabling the capture of longitudinal data and the build of the experience over time if people return for each section. It's still a work in progress, and while I've planned the narrative structure as well as created the content for the stories in collaboration with actors and artists, the final set of data gathering protocols and ethics-focused public delivery is still to come. It will of course involve not only new analysis techniques, but also a careful setup in terms of the constant data gathering and how awareness and consent is provided. So there's still lots to explore. So please watch this space for more developments. There is a short video available in the Expo section of today's event, which shows a little bit more about the Ergosum experience and the content, so do feel free to check that out. And thank you so much for listening.
So thanks to Ellie for producing that video at very short notice when she couldn't make it today. And I was slightly worried I was going to need to present it, so I'm pleased that she did. And now I'm really looking forward to having some discussion about the work that we've heard about. And I think, Kate, you talked about the sort of methods that you use that you might be watching the audience, or you might be doing certain things when it's live, but you've had to now move online. And I know that you're using a range of methodologies to look at how you develop your portal and how you think about your audiences. And I know I know you're currently doing some workshops because Eliana in the lab is working with you. It'd be really nice to hear a little bit more about that, and then maybe Anna could reflect a little bit more on some of the methods that she's using that she presented as well.
Yes, I mean, our methods are very sort of, what do I want to say, kind of non-scientific, should I say. So we've set up an online teacher focus group, which as you pointed out, Eliana is working very closely with us on. Eliana is doing the kind of very granular analysis of that. But for us, sharing our journey of creation with a wide group of teachers from primary and secondary schools as we move through this, very new creative process for us, is like a gift from heaven. And every time we share an idea or a bit of script or another part of our process, whether it's the sort of articulated response from the teachers, or as I said about watching audiences, their sort of physical responses to it, is telling us so much about where we're hitting the right points and where we're not. And that's what's in a way helped us to sort of do this thing of leaning into ourselves as theatre makers. And I think, if I've learned one thing this year, it's just like, never forget that that's what your thing is. Your storytellers, you're inventive, you're artist. And you can get so wrapped up in the technology or the digital stuff or the educational stuff in this case, you can forget to be the person you are. I answered your question, but that is a answer to your question.
Really interesting, Kate. And there's a question in the chat just before we move over to Anna to say that Sophie's asked, is this digital presentation engaging a different cohort of schools or young audiences than the live performance that you normally have at the Egg? So I think that's really interesting in terms of are you finding that, or are you aiming for that maybe?
Well, obviously, yes. The idea of the product, as I said, is that it's a marketing tool, and we want to reach out to more bigger audiences and to allow what starts off its life as a live performance to have a much longer life that is not reliant upon the kind of carbon heavy and finance heavy process of touring show. But just to answer that question in a very specific way, so we've had to hold on to the notion that this is a live show related digital asset, because otherwise we would just end up as theatre makers creating an educational product, digital product, and that's not our job.
Yeah.
So in its first iteration, it will go hand in hand with a live performance. That live performance will either be in their school or they'll go to a venue. But after we finished touring the show as a live thing, we will have the learning portal and a well digitized film of the play, and they can go hand in hand together. And so hopefully that's the point at which we'll start to discover this demand. And I can't answer the question about the wideness of the audience at the moment. I'm still rebooking the tour. I had a tour booked last year, like everybody else. That was before we started doing all this work on the portal. What I do know is that all of the venues and all of the teachers that we've reached out to are really, kind of like inspired by this idea. They've all created a picture of it in their head, and they're all going, gosh, yes, this really meets our need. So, the prognosis is good, but I have no outcomes at the moment.
That's great. Thank you. Anna, can I ask to talk a little bit about generally your work that you've been doing on the cluster and the method? You talk a bit about the methods for the particular study, but maybe a little bit about the online program where you were doing the questionnaires for when Bristol did the live performances. The performances online, or maybe a little bit about the process that you've gone through in terms of this project.
Yeah, sure, Danae. Well, the process that I've gone through was just kind of getting to know the cluster and getting to know the cluster as it changes rapidly, but also the kind of Bristol arts and culture scene, something really fantastic to see. And it was just as I was joining the project, was to see how quickly the scene is adapting. Bristol was really one of the first cities to respond and to put together an online program. And that is something which Claire Reddington mentioned in the opening chat about the Bristol Arts Channel. So I joined the project in April. And really by end of May, the Bristol Arts Channel was a program which brought together Bristol's arts and culture institutions, and they put together a program of online events. And really, people in Bristol felt like this was back in a way, and just the way we would normally go out and see theatre. This was, of course, online. So that was something really interesting that I got to be part of. And we did a very simple survey at the end of it, just to see kind of who was part of the audience and how they felt about the initiative and the event. It was a really interesting process. For me, it was very important to see kind of to reflect on how can we create a survey which is meaningful, but it's also not too much because you're asking people's times and you want a higher engagement. Also, we wanted to combine quantitative and qualitative methods. Have our kind of numbers put on experiences, but also allow space for people to reflect. And that was very interesting for me personally because I could see the separation. So we distributed this survey both to the natural audiences of the Bristol Arts Channel, which were people who are interested in art and culture. But we also distributed the surveys to a kind of university mailing list. So we recruited people who wouldn't normally hear about the channel to come and join some of the events, and then we followed up on them. First of all, I have to say that was people found it absolutely fascinating, and everyone really enjoyed these events that they wouldn't have normally found, or they would have probably because the promotion was really good. But we get to chat to them about them, and everyone felt, especially that cohort of scientists who said, we wouldn't normally seek out arts and culture, not in this context. I would probably go to a concert once a year. I didn't even realize I was missing it. That's the kind of response we were getting from them, which was really powerful. In terms of the methods, what I started saying is it was interesting to see people's approaches, because especially when I was piloting the survey, people from universities, from our usual population, found obviously the number-based questions very intuitive, very easy to do. And then we were asking them to write something, to reflect, and they're like, oh, I don't really necessarily know how to express myself in that way. Whereas from the kind of natural audiences, we got these really amazing responses, describing experiences, reflecting on the importance of everything. To me personally, as a researcher, starting to really work in that sector, it was really eye-opening to see and to understand how to better work with these different people, because both groups were really fascinated by the experience. One group, and I've not gotten into this, so I don't know if that's the accurate interpretation, but one group seemed to lack the language or wasn't so used to expressing themselves. So that's something I really took with me for future work, to just be mindful of.
Thank you, Anna. So that was the project that you did before you were moving into the work that you presented today. Thanks for that. There were a lot of comments coming up about the portal, Kate, which is fantastic. And I just, there's a question from Kate Pullinger asking, we're really interested in your shift to film from Stornoway, Kate. Has this changed the way you think about your own theatre space in terms of the priority in the past of getting bums on seats?
Yeah, I've been looking at that question, trying to work out how to answer it.
Oh, sorry. That was a really nice question.
No, I'm glad you know, but it's good that you said it out loud, but I saw it in the chat. I think I have to be really honest and say I can't talk about anything in the past tense yet. We're deep in it, and we're in the pandemic, and I'm not yet running a live theatre. But I think that what we've always wanted to do is have bums on seats, whatever that means, whether that's a bum on a seat in the Egg Theatre, or another young person or another school ignited by the notion of live art or art, right? So that's our driver all the time. And we've been so limited by the parameters of space and time and geography, right? It's like you have to be here at a certain time. And I just to say one thing about the Stornoway platform then is that it's not live, right? So in order to create that possibility of, you know, global reach with a product, we are not live, because live again is restrictive on time and space, money, etc., personnel. So I've yet to discover how many doors that non-liveness is going to open up for us as theatre makers, and that is part of what I'm interested in finding out. But going back to what Ellie was saying in her film, we too will be able to chart the journey using the Stornoway platform with the data, and that is the kind of data that, you know, any artist maker, you know, theatre maker, producer would just die for. So I'm really excited to see that when it starts coming through.
Oh, that's great. It's really interesting to see how Ellie's, yours, and Anna's work is all looking in very different ways at performance, and the type of methods that you're using. I'm conscious of time. We've only got a few minutes left. It's gone very quickly, but I'd really like to ask you the question, like the cluster carries on for the next 2 years. We've actually got projects going beyond that, as we know. Where would you like? What would you like to see in a couple of years' time? What would be great if you'd achieved? What would it be great to achieve over the next couple of years? Shall I go to Anna first there, and then pass to you, Kate?
Oh, sorry. Did you say me first?
Yes. What would you know? In 2 years' time, what would be a great achievement in terms of the work you're doing?
Yeah. Well. Obviously, I'm really excited about all the innovation that's taking place, especially in terms of method. We're seeing some really interesting developments, things we can find out about people's emotions from just cameras and so on. And so that's something I want to obviously keep seeing. I want us to keep developing and improving those methods. But I also want to see just a kind of more responsible innovation and critical reflection on which of these methods are actually important, what are they important for. And that's something that I find really helpful in the cluster, because that's a fantastic sense check of like, yeah, these are all the amazing things we can do with technology, but which of these are the most useful, which of these should focus on. So for me personally, I think in 5 years' time, I want to see a better, or sort of a really good match between these two. So really the industry, creative industry, receiving the kind of methods that they need and are most useful for them.
Great, thanks, Anna. Can I ask you the same question, Kate? What would be a great outcome in 2 years for you? Oh, you're on mute.
You missed an absolute gem. Yeah, no, this year has really sort of opened up our processes, you know. So if we were like complacent before, we're not now. And that covers so much of our practice. Like I said at the beginning, it's not just about our digital approach, it's about our approach to inclusivity, to diversity, to the ethical practice across the organization. And so what that, in a really, it's a sort of slightly boring answer, but it kind of really changes the way that we budget. It changes the way that we produce. We look at okay, this is what we want in order to increase the inclusivity of our artists and our audiences. What now do we have to do? What is our producing process now? And I know that our producing process moving forward, our creation process, whether that's artistic or just like, you know, the producing managerial side of things, is changed forever.
Yeah. Well, we've ended our time. It's gone incredibly quickly. I thought we'd have loads more time for discussion. I want to thank David and Sarah for supporting our panel. That was great. I'd like to thank Kate and Anna for presenting, and a great discussion that obviously we could carry on, and we will carry on within the cluster. Ellie, and you know, fantastic. The last minute she managed to put a presentation together and get it to us like 2 minutes before the panel. So it's just brilliant. And everyone for joining us. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the day. There's plenty to come. And thanks very much for listening to this panel. Bye.